Gianotti, Director General for the European Organization for Nuclear Research and a member of the Board of Trustees of the World Economic Forum. And we also have Yo-Yo Ma, world-renowned cellist, and also a member of the Board of Trustees of the World Economic Forum. I'll hand over to you both for this.
Thank you. Thank you. So, Yo-Yo.
First of all, I need to clarify a very important point.
Yes.
Pronounce your name once again, because you should all remember. I used to call her Fabiola, and that is not
It's
correct.
wrong.
So what is it?
Fabiola. Fabiola. Fabiola.
Can everybody say that? Fabiola. Fabiola. Okay. Session's over. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you very much. So, Yo-Yo, what are we doing here?
Well, that's a very good question, because why are we a great particle physicist
And the great cellist.
and
A
some
great cellist.
old aging musician doing here, and how are we supposedly involved in trying to improve the state of the world?
Right. So I think that we are here first of all because we have been following and participating in the WEF activities through the Board of Trustees. And what does associate us? I think the fact that you are a great cellist, but also you are passionate about science. I'm a particle physics and I'm a music lover. And I think we believe that art and science can be scouts for a better future based on values. And I think as the theme of the WEF this year says, we are at a turning point in history. Why so? Well, you know, we are just out of a big pandemic, big crisis, now another crisis, a war in Europe. And these events have shaken the world, but also they divert our focus and our attention from the priorities and the main objectives. And the objectives are, the SDGs, are to work for a better planet and a better world. And these events also show our fragility and our vulnerability. They come all of a sudden, a few days, and then our priority change, we have dramatic consequences and unexpected events. So the question is, how can we contrast, how can we change this trend? And I think, and maybe you agree, that the answer is values.
I think one of the reasons that we got together and became friends is actually through the board, because I would observe that board members were all talking about very, very tough but interesting problem-solving subjects. And I saw you, I saw Raphael Rafe, who runs MIT, and we were thinking, because every time you opened your mouth, you were talking about how to give access to young people in the world. Now, how many young global shapers are there in the room? Can you just raise your hands?
Quite a lot. Yes. Good.
That's really great.
Exactly.
Because that's one of the things I know you have spent so much time at CERN, making sure that it is not just a research center, but is actually a full access educational center, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. So thanks for mentioning that. So actually well, let's say the values we are talking about and that are common to science and the arts are, in my opinion, first the universality of these two languages. We live in a fractured world, and I think the arts and science can play a key role in connecting people.
And one of the things that we hear talk a lot about, I think Professor Schwab actually talks about the scaffolding of truth, of trust, and that, in fact, a lot of the fractures that we experience today in the world comes from a lack of trust. You know, I talk to people, the reason I love Young Global Shapers, because my children are just a little bit older. They're 39, 36, So Gen Zs are of particular interest to me because a lot of studies about their values, right? About they wanting flexibility and wanting stuff. We hope to be able to actually engage the shapers or the ecopreneurs as part of the scouts for mainstream society, and you will all become mainstream society. So how can we, at this turning point, in our pursuit of, we can't build anything unless there's absolute trust, right? You run a place with 16,000 people, and how many countries?
More than 110 nationalities.
Yeah.
And the nice thing is this, some of these scientists come from countries that are not the best friend of each other.
Right, you go and see that, you took us on this wonderful, and you see this section is built by Iran, by China, by Russia, by Israel. The countries that actually don't have relations, but they participate.
Absolutely.
Building the collider.
And this is also the role of science and the arts. They can build bridges, and they can maintain bridges even at times where all other bridges are broken. So, for instance, times of war. And these bridges are absolutely essential to be able to rebuild when the time comes. So, clearly places like CERN or the arts, your music, cannot solve geopolitical conflict. However, they show what humanity can do when we set aside our differences and we focus on the common good. And I think the arts and science can really plant seeds of peace, of hope and trust in a fractured world.
Now, one of the differences between the two of us is that I grew up in a musical household. I chose the cello, and I'm still trying to figure out why I chose the cello. I thought it was big when I was 4. I wanted the biggest instrument, and I'm 66. I'm still playing, still trying to get it right. Now, what was interesting to me about Fabiola is that this is fascinating. She graduated from the Milan Conservatory in piano, studied Greek and Latin, studied philosophy in university. And the funny thing is, you thought you would give up philosophy because you wanted to do something more practical. And so you went into particle physics. I'm just saying.
But it's easy because, I love philosophy. I love philosophy. But philosophy, I hope there is no philosopher here in the room. Philosophers usually turn around the question. They loop, and at the end you don't have the answer. Okay? Whereas particle physics and science in general, your goal is to answer the open questions. And this is what attracted me into physics. The fact that, that I was very curious. I wanted to understand how things work. And there is nothing more fundamental than particle physics because it studies the building blocks of nature, so elementary particles, which are objects that you cannot cut into smaller pieces. So it's really the building block of the universe and the way they interact at the most fundamental level. But I think I was telling you this some time ago, I think my studies, my music studies and my humanities studies have contributed to what I am today as a physicist as much as my physics studies. And I'm saying that because very often we try to put the different aspect of culture in silos, music, science, humanities, and very often I get asked about how it comes that you abandon humanities and music to study physics. I didn't abandon anything. I just continued in music, physics, humanities. They are all part of our, creativity or our intrinsic way of being human being with our intelligence, our creativity, our curiosity. So I think it's very important that we do not get classified and structured. And that's why also sometimes I hear, there are many young people here, that in some countries you have to choose your professional path when you are 13.
So let's ask a question. Of the global shapers here, how many of you have more than one passion?
All of them.
Nice.
All of them.
This is great. And that's why it's important that Fabiola speaks to all of us, because you have had always more than one passion, and you've had successive passions. But once, you know, my time, my age, you chose something, and if you switched, you're unreliable, right? Not a good person. Today, I have friends who are between 20 and 30 who are now on their 4th jobs. My son has switched career 3 times.
It's called flexibility.
Yeah, and so I think, so there, in terms of looking for reset, and we're talking, you know, sessions, Manny went to a hybrid session about working. You know, I read about, so values, flexibility, non-toxic work environment, you know, able to actually be able to have changing responsibilities. So you're not stuck doing one thing. That's different from my era. And I'm really interested in how you've been able to, of course you're much younger than I am, but you were able to navigate through all of these different stages in life. And you told me something interesting. I said, you know, was it a professor? Was it people that you do you remember what your answer was?
I don't remember. What did I say? Parents. Thank you. Yes, right. Absolutely. As I told you, I had fantastic parents who actually taught me, gave me also this flexibility, because since I was a kid, they allowed me and they encouraged me to look at different things and have different experiences. So I think it's very, very important that the young people are exposed to as many experiences and opportunities that they have. It's very, I was saying before that it's, when I see that in some educational system, in some countries, you have to choose at the age of 13 whether you want to be a scientist or a humanist or a musician or an economist. How can you choose at the age of 13? It's far too early. So I think it's better to keep paths open as much as possible for the young people, so that they, you know, what we are is the ensemble of the experiences that we go through. And so, you know, the more experiences we have, the richer we are, and so also the stronger we are in facing the challenges of the world. And beyond that, one of the things that I find quite challenging nowadays is that we live in a world where the economy and the market requires people that are more and more specialized. You have to be the world expert on something to get a job. And we know that maybe in 20 years from now, the current jobs will not exist. So the best education, the best tools we can give to the young people is to give them a broad culture and the skills rather than the technical knowledge, the skills to change and to be able to adapt to the needs of the market.
It's true. I was spent a couple days at a medical school and talking to medical students, and they're basically taught by their professors to say the best thing we can teach you is how you can teach yourself, because 4 years from now, everything that you learn
today
here is obsolete.
Absolutely.
So that's, you know, that's a tough thing to go through, and yet medical school students have to go through the same rituals of how many years of residency, how often you have to stay up for 72 hours, because I did it, so you have to do that. Is that right, or is that, so there's the tradition and innovation part, right? So part of a reset is finding out, let's not throw out the baby with the bathwater.
Yes.
Right? What's the baby, and what are really good things, and how to do that, and how to argue for that in a good way with either other generations, and to keep that conversation alive. I find I have to do that in family, because everybody in my family has a much louder voice than me. So I have to listen to them all the time, you know, and every once in a while I raise my hand.
Can I say something?
Can I say something? Permission to speak.
Yes, right. Speaking about education and training and knowledge, maybe one thing that I would like to stress, and we discussed this, and I think we try to do at CERN at least, is the importance of open science. So knowledge and education accessible to everybody for free. This is, in my opinion, one of the main tools we have nowadays to reduce the inequalities in the world, because clearly education and knowledge are empowering tools. I think the best thing you can do for a person is not to give this person money. Of course, money helps, but especially giving, education and knowledge, and this person then can have a successful path in life. So it's very important that these important tools, education and knowledge, are available to everybody for free. And unfortunately, this is not always the case. And so we see a world that goes at two speeds. Now we have the developed countries, the rich countries that evolve more and more, faster and faster, because the technology evolves so fast. And the other half of the world that does not manage to get at the same level. So, and every time there is a crisis, be it a pandemic or a war, this gap becomes wider and wider. So I think that open science is a key word. Getting out of this philosophy and this approach of protecting what we know and our knowledge is absolutely fundamental.
Well, you were famously quoted quoting, I think, Marconi, who invented what
yes.
And said, someone from
Congress
Congress said, "How is that useful?"
And he answered,
what was his answer?
He said, "I don't know, but I'm sure that one day you will tax it." So it's
right. So that's where the idea of scouts came in, because think about all the things that you do. You spent 25 years looking for the God particle, Higgs boson, right? And you found, so this is interesting because supposedly that finding the Higgs boson, it's not like finding another particle, but rather this would actually show us which direction
absolutely.
of physics and the universe will go in.
Absolutely.
So that's like really far out in the future. Is it going to go completely chaotically, or is it going to be a beautiful symmetry? Not unlike the very things we face in life. A decision we make, fork in the road. One decision, everything will be over. The other one, possible hope, right? And it depended on two measurements. I just remember 115 and 140 something.
140 something, and it's in the middle, right?
Yeah,
In the middle.
140 would have been chaos, 115 would have been, wow, it's beautiful, it's elegant, all the good
Right in the
things that
middle.
math and physics should give us. It was 125.
Okay, maybe I can say something about, to introduce the Higgs boson, just saying that without the Higgs boson we will not be here. So I think it's quite an important particle, because it's a particle that allows atoms, of which we are all made, to stick together and to exist as stable systems. And of course, if this special particle was not there, then we will not be here. So that's also the importance of knowing.
But this is where we also get to truth, right? Because so often in mainstream society, people are always saying, science says this, science says that, or ideologies, this is the truth. What is your definition of truth?
So I think there is no single truth, an absolute truth. Of course, there is a scientific truth. The Higgs boson exists. That's clear. You can try. You can do your experiment. You will find it. If you have enough, if you have a big collider, 27 kilometer, you can build it. Then you can try. So it's there. However, this truth is an evolving truth. Science is not immutable. Science progresses incrementally. So if you want, I like to talk about truth as an aspiration. Okay, so the aspiration of a path of inquiry, of exploration, of scouting. We are talking about scouting, and a path that has no end point. I think that the path of knowledge will never end. Thanks goodness, because if we knew everything, there would be no fun in life.
Well, you even said that actually with the discovery of Higgs boson, and what is it that we know from physics and what don't we know? So standard model does not include gravity, does not include dark matter,
dark universe,
or dark energy. Now these are all things that we now know exist since 15 years?
Absolutely. So we know a lot, and we have understood a lot from quantum mechanics, relativity, and the standard model, that is the theory that describes the elementary particles and their interactions. We know a lot of things, and this theory can describe very well our world. However, there is a big question mark. The question mark, well, many big question marks. One is the dark universe that Yo-Yo just mentioned, because as you can see, he has quite a good CV in physics. It's quite knows quite a lot of things. So when you look at the sky at night and we see the beautiful stars and planets and galaxies, what we see is only 5% of what is out there, which is embarrassing, because you will say,
so everything we see, it's only 5%.
The rest is a question mark. It's called dark universe, and the dark universe is one of the obsessions of scientists today, not only particle physicists like me, but also astroparticle physicists, cosmology. So we think that there is some 25% of dark matter, so a form of matter made of particles that we do not know, and about 70% of dark energy, which is responsible for the accelerated expansion of the universe. So dark, in my opinion, indicates two things. First, our ignorance, but the fact that these two forms of matters and energy do not interact with our instruments. So we deduce their existence from indirect proofs. And so this is an example of the path of knowledge. We still have to find, to understand 95% of the universe, and I hope that some of the young global shapers here may be interested in helping us to find at least a few percent more and to increase our knowledge.
So Fabiola, this brings to mind something that I think a lot about in terms of both truth and what we don't know. So I used to annoy Manny, pianist with whom I played, who loves what you do. We've been playing together for more than 50 years. And I'd come with an idea and says, Manny, we should do this. He said, okay, sure, why not? There are many ways to do this. I would get furious with it because we had to come to a decision. I thought, this was the right thing to do. But he had a broader view of saying, there are many choices. And only after a long discussion would I be able to understand that actually he had some favorite choices, but he makes sure that he maintains, a viewpoint that encompasses much more than whatever we're doing, which leads me to the idea of, again, truth, perfection. So many musicians in my area, try and think, this is the score, this is perfection, and this is just the composer's intention. Well, the composer's dead, and if the composer were alive, what would that person say? And as a younger person doing something around the age of the shapers, how dare you play all the Bach cello suites because Casals didn't do it until he was, and how can you be worthy of doing something with great weight on your shoulders? And I came around it by saying to myself, look, I may be 26 or 27, but the recording is actually the best that I can come up with during the days that I'm recording. That's it. It's not people say, oh, it's permanent, whatever. No, what's permanent is how you grow. Because if you stop growing, you're dead.
Exactly.
Right? And that's where we start to get into the same realm of art and science and scouting, because what you find at the edges, it's in nature, the edges of ecosystems is where we actually have the most new life and the least density of life. Now, if that's so in nature, that could be with a younger age group. You are meeting at an edge where you are understanding how life could be, should be, might be, and older people like me are trying to make sense of the world as I age, say, well, I'm getting closer and closer to the end. And I meet so many friends who are dying, you know, and I started thinking, and I want to try this by you. I want to, when we talk later on, I want to ask you guys, I've spent my whole life thinking about what is art. High art, low art, middle art, folk art, whatever, you know. I was wondering, why do we have these categories? We talk about excellence, perfection. What is it? And I started thinking more and more that actually about humans. And I started thinking that as far as culture is concerned, because I have 3 grandchildren, so I see them, you know, grow up sort of, I'd say, the rate of what they acquire and how they change. They're learning everything and seeing everything for the first time and making decisions on what the world is and manipulating their parents and grandparents and doing all those things, but coming up with incredible wisdom, because it's their edge effect that they're meeting. And also people at the end of life, assessing what they missed out on, what they loved, what meaning was all about. And I started thinking, this is what I want to test by you, that actually it's not about high art, low art. It's about every life we know is unique. Genetically unique, experientially unique. Even if you're twins, right? We have studies on twins. But so that in fact, your life is an art form. And that is only determined by the end of life what your art form is. Every choice that you make leads to something, right? So if the butterfly flutters its wings in Beijing, something's going to happen. Same thing with little things. If you've been dissed by somebody or humiliated, or you've humiliated somebody else, there's going to be an effect.
Absolutely.
Right? So in fact, you are artists and scientists because you're experimenting without the control, obviously, on what you are saying, what you're doing, how you act, and how that affects the world around you and how it rests with you. Because at the end of life, you don't want to have too many regrets. Right? Exactly. So that's, that takes you out of the immediacy of life question. And does that resonate with you? Does that make sense according to your understanding of the world and humanity?
Yes, fully, Yo-Yo. I think what you said is really true, and we are unique. We are so many and so different, but so similar in some sense, but also so different and so unique. And I think, as you said, everything we do has an impact, but not only on us, but on many other people, and also on the fate of the world. So we are all so minuscule, but also so very important. So I think it's a big responsibility also. Because
yeah, but I like you because I see you act as a human being. You don't treat people invisibly.
Not at all.
You never do. Everybody around, I see you, I watch you, and I admire that, because you could easily do that, but you don't. And that kind of modesty,
it's important,
is so important. And I could say, yeah, she's such an important person. I'm not going to say that.
Same for you.
Because I observe that for you, and my liking of you
likewise
is that of a human being.
Likewise,
and that's your first job.
Yes, but very often people ask me, what should I do to become, a great scientist, etc. And of course, my answer is motivation, passion, determination. You have to be stubborn, really, because there are difficulties and difficulties. But as in any other field in life, it's not that music is easier. But what is important is to be humble and modest in the good sense of the word, because only if you are modest, you can really try to do the best, and you will try to improve yourself, and also, of course, respectful of other people, and that's obvious. So, but going back to we forgot to ask them, Yo-Yo, at the beginning, that if they want to ask questions, they can do so.
Moment.
They can do so even, you know.
Right, we forgot, but let's,
please
anybody who
interrupt
has
us
a question,
and
yeah.
hear. Ah, yes, we see.
Great,
Very
perfect.
good.
So, call them out. So,
We do have we have a mic? Yes.
Yes, lady there, 2, and then 3. Okay,
Good.
go.
And 4.
4, okay, great. All right, no, the lady behind you? She's first.
Yes.
Unless you
Less
claim
respect.
to be a lady, which is totally fine, but you go next. And then
She was faster.
So I'm so glad to be here and listen from you. I'm Camila from Global Shapers. And I want to ask you about, like, we have like 9 types of intelligence. And musical and logical, mathematical is so close. So from your perspective, how we can bring those things for like regular school, for more kids have this opportunity to question the existence of the world, the universe, and also like go forward to be like better persons, because I think especially for the South Global, we have like a low education. So bring those different types of intelligence to school could be good.
you start. Great question.
It's a great question. Thank you, Camilla, for asking it. I think what you said, the key word is education. But as we were saying before, education in a broad way. An education which is not just, 2 hours of math, 3 hours of English, Italian, French, wherever you live, or half an hour of music, because music's usually school, little music, unless you go to the conservatory. I think it's very important that education becomes, starting with the small kids, becomes something, more global, interconnected, where you give the children the tools. Okay, the tools to face the challenges and to evolve, and so I think it's very important that the education system changes, becomes more modern, and not so rigid and not so structured as it used to be. But that the different topics are taught in a holistic way, looking at all the facets. And as part of the same culture, I was saying before, why should we say that physics and music are not compatible? They are compatible also because the fundamental principle of both music and physics are principle of beauty. Here I should open a parenthesis, but I think that I will not, maybe at the end. So if you look at the law of natures, at the most fundamental level, the standard model, you see that those laws are based on symmetry principle, and symmetry is a concept of beauty. So nature has chosen beauty at the most fundamental level. So just to tell that physics, music are not two different things. So, Monday music, Tuesday physics, Wednesday math. Why? Why education is not more, holistic, comprehensive, and intertwined? And so that's the only thing I can say. But, it requires a cultural shift. And they require education of the teachers first. Oh. That's the point.
Back to values, I think seeding curiosity, making sure that collaboration can happen, and knowing how to inspire, and somehow, associating what is to be learned with wonder. I need to know that, as opposed to I should do that, right? It's a very small, pivot, but that would be a good principle. Okay, you. Question. You can just speak up. Is there a mic? Bring to this.
I think for the
fine
webcast
young
or for
gentleman.
the recording.
Okay, yeah.
David Dow, Global Shapers from the Surrey Cup.
Hi.
Yes.
I'm a scientist. I've always wanted to become a scientist since the
Very
age
good.
of
I mean,
5.
you should not be.
I remember when I was tearing up, I was an intern at CERN back 10 years ago
Ah,
when the
good.
announcement of the Higgs boson was announced with the Comic Sans and everything. I still remember that.
See?
That makes sense.
So good.
I know I shouldn't mention it, but yeah, I think it's a fun fact. But I want to provide some more darker perspective ever since that journey point, which is nothing against the scientific science, the science I idealize, but a little bit about the scientific community and also the communication of the scientific results. So the scientific community, and I think we've seen this over the last years in the pandemic with climate change, is losing trust in society. And I believe much of that has to do with the fact that scientists do not wish, or many scientists are resistant towards communicating their science to the public. They don't see that as part of their scientific community. There is also a problem of that current scientists are governed by a community that usually have leaders of science in the 20th century that decides what science is and what science is not. And that actually slows down much of the scientific progress. If you look at great scientific results, for example, in computer science, like the blockchain technology, not a lot of people know this does not come from the scientific community, this paper. It comes from outside, from an anonymous author, which would be incredible for a scientist to not put his name on it. My question is, and this is something I've asked myself for quite a long time, do we need to change the scientific community to adapt to the 21st century, to regain the trust of society? How does art could help us communicate these messages better? Otherwise, we would fail future generations, the climate crisis, and many things more.
Yeah, I guess it's addressed primarily to me. Thanks, it's a very good question. I don't think we have to change the scientific community. I think we have to continue to, to make sure that the scientists communicate better and more. There is improvement. I've seen also in my field, for instance, 20, 30 years ago, physicists in my field will not communicate that much. Today it has become a necessity, but not because of course, science is not something that we do for ourselves. Knowledge is not something that we do for ourselves. Yo-Yo plays his cello not in his room. He does it for the public. A painting is for everybody to see and admire. So science and the knowledge that the scientists develop is for everybody. So this is the first thing. And second, as you said correctly, the lack of trust and the trust deficit that we find everywhere in the world and society today, in particular also for science, is due to the fact that sometimes scientists have not been communicated well. And communicating science is not just communicating the big discovery, because discoveries, communicating the discovery of the Higgs boson is easy. I think what is more important is to communicate the way science works. The scientific method, the fact that science, there are also mistakes sometimes, the fact that science progresses by steps and is not immutable. And also when you communicate as a scientist, you should really make clear what is the difference between what the data tell and what is your own interpretation of the data. And this is some of the problems that we got during the pandemic, where it was, sometimes listening to immunologists, etc., it was not clear if what they were saying was really, what the data were saying or their interpretation, because then sometimes you could hear immunologist A to say something and B saying the opposite of this something. So I think it's very important. And I'm not blaming them, because of course also the scientists found themselves in this kind of turmoil or tsunami of the pandemic, and they did what they could. But I think it's very important that we communicate science in a deeper and a broader way, emphasizing the scientific method, what we know, and what we do not know. So thanks for the question.
If I can very briefly address your question, I know time is short, but I would just like to say that I think everybody in this room, we are, whether we like it or not, but I think most of us probably appreciate it, are children of the Enlightenment. In other words, everything that we do here, whether it's nation building or community building, our knowledge of science, of categories, come from just the last 300-400 years. And during times of trouble, we talked about going to basically to values, right? What are the beginning values? The beginning values of the Enlightenment actually was that arts and sciences were under natural philosophy. So it's not about scientists or artists, it's about who you are as a member of a larger thing, society. I would like to claim that, in fact, the people that I ask, scientists who I ask, are we part of nature? Fabiola always says yes. And most scientists I would talk to would say yes. That's actually totally in accord with, I think, most Gen Zs. We are part of nature. Maybe what we missed out on a little bit in the Enlightenment are two things. One is that we started extracting from nature more than acknowledging we're part of nature. But you have 5% of the world, the indigenous people of the world, who actually live thinking they are part of nature and actually are really good custodians of 30% of the land. 30% of land they are guardians of. I think there's a connection between indigenous knowledge, scientific knowledge, that actually agree on the larger part of where trust begins.
Yes.
Right? So circular capitalism, same thing. We can evolve towards a common philosophy, which is what we actually need in order to reboot the Enlightenment or reset whatever our Weltanschauung is. Next question, yes. Does that make sense?
Hi, Carlos Eduardo Vargas from Caracas, Venezuela.
Yes.
Social innovator and also part of the Global Shapers community. You probably have heard about something called the sound of the universe, which is that some years ago the astronomers said that a black hole singing sounded more likely like a B-flat note. And I was thinking on that when I said, and I started hearing your talk that I think has been amazing. I'm passionate about culture, innovation, and sustainability and how it intersects. And this thing about B-flat being the sound of the universe, I think portrays what we have heard today. And I wanted to ask you separate questions, but very specific ones to Yo-Yo. What is your universe? Like, what is the space that you are right now? And to Fabiola, what's your sound? Like, what's the movement that right now, what keeps you moving day by day? Thank you.
Yo-Yo, answer first so that I can think.
No, you go first. because I actually have that sound.
You don't have to answer about the sound, you have to answer about the universe. It's me who has to answer. Tries to. So what is my sound? First of all, as I was telling Yo-Yo before, music, because I have such a big passion for music, is always with me. Music is all day. I depending on my mood, I play in my mind Bach rather than Mendelssohn or I don't know Chopin or something else. So clearly, it's always with me. And then actually, the sound that for me it's more intriguing is the initial beat of the universe. So, the cosmic background radiation, and which reflect the early universe, 380,000 years after the background. These are the maps that we get today of the telescope with the initial universe. And in some sense, those frequencies that you see in those maps, for me, this is the sound and the footprint and the sound, the musical sound of the universe.
I'm
Give you 2
desperately
seconds.
trying to find the sound of the universe of that black hole.
Yo, I think
It's
our session is over.
27 octaves below B flat. And actually, I know the people at MIT who actually are doing this work. I think there should be a wonderful piece of music that comes out of the sound, and also of when the gravity, LIGO.
Yes, the
LIGO,
gravitational
there's a little
waves,
sound that goes
yes.
"Weep," you know, and the sound of the black hole is unbelievable.
Yes. And then,
And actually,
well, also the Higgs boson has been sonified. So.
absolutely, and the sound of birds and the sound of the aurora borealis, you know, everything that we know is actually interpreted biochemically and electrically to our brain, right? So it is all interpretation. Absolutely, there's sound. I know there's one last question, and then we will end.
Another one here.
Okay, go.
Can we?
We're
Yeah, we'll
almost
flow.
running out of time, so hi
Joseph
there, how
is
are
not
you?
happy.
Nice to see you again. Yes.
Hello.
So yeah, Fatima Zahra from a global shaper from Morocco. So as artists and scientists and as just humans with aspirations, we know the value of humility, but kind of throughout my experience and kind of just relating to my peers as well, I think we often mistake humility for humiliation, where
course.
we downplay our contributions instead of acknowledging them, but without vanity. So I was just like curious, you know, when you speak of being humble, what does it mean to be humble for you?
Yes, of course. Thank you. No, thank you. I don't. And of course, I don't think.
I warned you.
So I don't mean, of course, humiliation. What I mean by being humble means putting yourself, first of all, respecting the other human beings, because people who are arrogant usually, you know, do not respect the others or feel that they are 2 steps above the others. First of all, respecting everybody. Respect is absolutely one of the main, you know, principle of the code of conduct, say, of a good person. But also humility, you know, when you work as a scientist at the level of fundamental physics, and you see how little we know, Newton used to say, what we know is a droplet, what we don't know is an ocean, and it's still true after many centuries. So you can only be humble in front of the beauty of the universe, humble in front of the magnitude of the universe, 10 to the 28 centimeters, so 10 with 28 zeros, you know, and we are like that. So, but also being humble means that you you don't feel that as you have achieved everything. On the contrary, you feel you are pushed to do more and to do better. Being humble doesn't mean not being determined, you know, doesn't mean not being motivated, doesn't mean not to be strong and resilient, but means putting yourself with the right attitude and approach to go ahead and do better and more.
Great. Ego management.
But we are unfortunately running out of time for the session now.
Great.
However,
Yes.
I believe we're going to go down to the health bar, and if you would like to come and join us and continue our conversation with a
Please.
glass of water or a coffee with Yo-Yo and
Pleasure.
Fabiola,
Good.
right?
Yes.
You learn it. Good.
We can
Very good.
continue
Got
our
it.
conversation. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi.
Come to the cafe. Come to the cafe.